Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh is brought to you by
Mary Freebed, Collectible Insurance Services, West Michigan Eye Care Associates, Eric Hall Aesthetic and General Dentistry, Calder Financial, Grand Management Group, Encore Business Group, and Rydan Investments.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.
Stay informed and stay vigilant. Coming back here with Greg Gania, the do-it-all play-by-play guy for Erie and Detroit and everybody else here, and I think he's on the road right now. But I wanted to talk about the prospects and everything, Greg, because I've been reading a lot about there's a lot of scouts in AA Erie, as there should be, because there's a lot of good players there. But like you said, you don't necessarily want to leverage that future too much. They became the top record in baseball without a lot of the guys that they could acquire, and you don't want to necessarily leverage too much of the future. You're in a good situation with how many prospects you have in the cupboard, but you don't want to have to empty it in order to get guys that are shorter term and just go for the run this year. Because as you know, since you've seen most of these guys come through Erie and now are seeing more guys that are potential starters and all-stars coming through right now, it's not the time to sell, because the future can be a long-winded future. It doesn't have to necessarily be, hey, let's go for this year or it's over. They've got some years, hopefully, if they play this right.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing is how all in do you go? And I think there's only one person, probably two, that's Chris Ilitch and Scott Harris, who probably know what that answer is right now as we sit here, a couple of days away from the deadline. Scott, I've gotten to know Scott enough over the last 2 years to where I know he is very measured in everything he does when he approaches this job. And so I don't know if you're going to see a big splash. I don't know if it's going to be a couple of small moves. I know they made a move earlier today. And, when you could acquire a couple of arms for a Florida Complex League catcher, that looked like it was a pretty good deal to me. So, I think they're going to be measured with this. And, it'd be one thing if say, Paul Skeens was on the market, which it doesn't sound like Pittsburgh would part with a guy like that, and nor should they. But if you had a chance to acquire a generational talent like when the Padres acquired Juan Soto and they went on that run a couple of years ago, I think that's where you change your outlook on things. But, it would be a tough sell for, I'm sure, Scott and the entire organization to say, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to get rid of Max Clark, Kevin McGonigal, Josue Briseño, Tyron Lorenzo, and we're going to bring back this guy, and we think he's, it's one of those where you have to be absolutely sure if you're going to part with one of those guys, and who knows, they might end up doing that. I think one of the things that we learned under the Dave Dombrowski era, and obviously this is a much different time, but that was a time where there were no untouchables in the farm system, no matter who you were. I don't see Scott taking that approach, but it's going to be an interesting week. And you bring up the scouts. It was tough to tell who was in Erie to watch Erie and who was there to watch Somerset, because we were playing a Yankees affiliate. Now, normally, if you're sitting there and your big league team's out of it and you're playing a Yankees affiliate, then you say, okay, well, we know they're here to see assignment scouting for the Yankees. But that was one there where, you look at the rumor mill and then you look at the list of scouts that were in the house and you're saying, boy, they could be here for Erie, they could be here for the Yankees, or it just might be a guy on regular assignment scouting. And so it's one of those where you hope to see a little read through the tea leaves mentality, but I'll be honest with you, I was there all week last week, and I have no idea who is on the block, who is not on the block. It's tough because everybody's being very close to the vest right now, as they should be. So it's like I said, it's going to be an interesting week, and I always caution fans, because immediately a trade happens and fans will lose their minds, whether it's giving up a prospect or they don't feel that it's someone that is worth the return. And again, these guys, Scott Harris has not proven to do anything but build and do it the right way. And so you have to give him the benefit of the doubt.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, especially with the scouting thing. That's why it was funny to read about the fact that there were scouts. It's like, well, yeah, there's going to be scouts at a AA game of that caliber, no matter what time of year
exactly.
or what have you, that the good scouts are going to be scouting that. I also have a side note, though, that I wanted to mention to you, because you got the Moon Mammoths thing going. Like you said, everything's hitting on all cylinders. I loved that you were also turned into a South Park character for that game as well.
Yeah. So first off, I love South Park. I've loved it since I was in high school. Huge South Park fan. So I just started, so I don't use AI very often at all, but we were about to promote our first TV game about a month ago. And I said, you know what, I'm going to turn this into Muppets, and let's see if AI can do that. And it turned my broadcast partner and I into Muppets, and I'm like, all right, now I'm going to have fun with this. And so for the Thursday game, I did South Park characters, and then for the Saturday game, I did King of the Hill, because that was coming up. So I got to see what ChatGPT can drum up next for me.
I like that. Yeah, I didn't see the other ones. I just saw the South Park one, but the Muppets is great. I want to know who's going to be Statler and Waldorf, the two old characters in the balcony. I want to know who the announcing equivalent of them is here. But yeah, that's.
Well, I think that's pretty much every broadcaster in baseball. Once they do it for a long time, you just become a grumpy old man. So I think you could probably think about 100 baseball broadcasters in the country, and they could be those two old guys.
Well, Dirks and Benetti kind of have that energy together, but they're too young to be in that category. But They do a good job of like the buddy kind of adversarial, but on the same team at the same time kind of thing. So they have that energy, but yeah, you'd have to age them by about 50 years.
Well, and apparently Benetti dropped fighting Greg Ganias again because my phone is blowing up as I'm driving in my car to Akron, and I'm getting text alerts on my screen here, and it's something about fighting Greg Gania. So I'm like, Benetti at it again.
He's great. I had to tell Zach Linfield the same thing when we had him on the show, because he drops him a decent amount. And I said, that's nice. That's got to be nice as the PA announcer that you're not always highlighted. But he's like, well, I don't never hear him. I'm like, I know. That's why I'm telling you. You're not listening to the game. You're working your own game just like you are normally. But that's funny. Yeah, he gets through a lot of references for all of the games. But yeah, it's interesting to have that discussion about the future planning, because I didn't really think of the comparison to Dombrowski until you brought it up. But obviously they had a very good team for most of those Dombrowski years, but at the same time, he did clear out a lot of things. He had a very high salary to deal with because Ilitch was investing in the team at that time, and he was able to use a lot of that effectively and trade a lot of those prospects, and it did work out very well. Obviously, the Cabrera trade and other trades, but it is interesting to watch what Harris is doing because he doesn't have that same type of money to work with. Not that he won't ever, but right now it's not the same type of salary. We'll have to see what happens with Skubal and re-signing some of these guys, but the ability to put together this team with some shrewd moves, because that's the other thing I thought of when you were talking about, well, the fans aren't necessarily going to like this person or that person or be too judgmental too quickly. A lot of the players on this team have gotten that already. We gave up on Torkelson for a little while. We gave up on Baez for a little while. Nobody was that excited about Zach McKinstry when he got here, but those are three guys that are all-star caliber players this year.
You're absolutely right. And that's, look, I've been doing this for so long, and you almost have to just put some of the commentary from fans out of your minds, especially when you're in those positions of power, when you're making roster moves. Fans are always going to find something to gripe about, and you can have a 120-win team, or you can have a 50-win team. And I had an interesting conversation one day with this was last season with a couple of the Tiger Tiger beat writers. And I said, obviously you guys all want the team to win because it's fun to cover winning baseball. And I didn't even think of this, but one of them pointed out to me, yeah, we love covering when a team wins. We want the team to win because that makes our job easier. It's a lot easier when you walk into a clubhouse after a ball game and, 5 out of 6 days the team is a winning team. But they said the other thing on the flip side of that is the amount of just pure vitriol they get from fans when the team wins because, well, we're not winning enough and we have holes on the team and, we're going to win a World Series and it's got to be this, and this. So it does cut both ways. But again, I'll take winning anytime.
That's a concept that's always intrigued me because you often have to present to fans like, okay, they made this historic run, kind of like last year. They made a great run, got extra baseball, and it was a great run across the board. Very unpredictable all the way through. We all know about the chances in early August of making the playoffs, and then they go on the big run. And then people were still kind of disappointed after they were out. And I wanted to remind people that it's basically your mindset. It's scarcity versus abundance. Are you going to focus on what you don't get from this point forward? Oh, they didn't make it to the World Series. Or are you going to focus on the fact that they weren't predicted to make the playoffs or do anything, and then they make it, win a series? You got to focus on the abundance of that we got extra series and extra baseball, and very fun baseball at that.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, and I heard Dickerson say this tonight on the broadcast, where I think he said the Dodgers have lost 10 of their last 15 ball games. And let's put that into perspective for a minute here. The Los Angeles Dodgers just won the World Series, and their payroll is, $400 million? And that's a team that just lost 10 of 15 ball games. And they're really, really good. So that's where I caution people when they get too high and they get too low. Baseball's a long season. And the range of emotion for fans tends to just ride very high and very low. I've got a buddy who is one of the biggest Tiger fans I know, and he was sending me just doom and gloom texts all last week, and then last night I'm getting texts that are the complete opposite. I'm like, dude, just relax and let's see where this is at the end of September, because that's what it is. It's a long season. You're not going to win every single ball game, and the good teams still do go in slumps. Baseball is not an easy sport. It is not easy to hit a baseball, and when you're the Dodgers or where you're the Tigers, who are the Tigers for a good chunk of the year, the best team in all of Major League Baseball, you go from the hunter to the hunted. And when you're the hunted, you are getting everybody else's best on every single day. And it is tough to sustain that for a long season. You're going to have ebbs and flows throughout the season. And that's why I love A.J. Hinch's approach. It's a measured approach as well. We hit the reset button. We're not going to think about what happened yesterday. We're not going to focus on tomorrow. We're focusing on today. And that's been that buy-in in that Tiger clubhouse. And that's what got them to the playoffs last year. And that's what's going to get them out of the funk they're in this year.
And Hinch mentioned it in a recent press conference, but the idea that if you're going to have a slump, because you are going to have a slump at some point in the season, this is the time to have it. They can gather information. They can regroup. They're not close to the playoff run right now. They can make some adjustments in the trade portal here and before the trade deadline. And so yeah, I'm with you. It's going to happen at some point in time, and it's better now than certainly later in the season. But good conversation as always. I appreciate you taking the time, especially with everything you got going on, and tell the people where they should follow you and everything else going on, because there's a lot to follow here.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Greg_Gania. That's the best way. I love hearing from fans. I hear from them all the time, and sometimes good, sometimes bad. But you know what? Everybody's got an opinion. So, but yeah, the best way to find me is on Twitter, and then for Erie games, SeaWolves.com. We got a good thing going in Erie right now. It's been a fun, magical ride the last couple of years, and hoping for that three-peat this year.
Well, we might get taken out by the fans with our segment on the fans, the most recent segment here. But yeah, we do love the fans. And yeah, it's nice that you're able to interact. You and the rest of the play-by-play folks and commentating folks do interact with the fans a lot, and that's very cool. So we appreciate you coming on.
The minute I get out of the car, I'm going to have a tweet by somebody telling me I don't know what I'm talking about the trade deadline. That's clearly happened.
Yeah, it's there's a lot that goes into it. Like you said, there's truly only one or two people that are knowing about it right now. They're in the rooms, they're working on it. Scott Harris has gotten it going here, so we'll see what happens. But great to talk with you, and hopefully we'll be able to talk with you again as all this stuff develops here.
All right, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Greg. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks to Greg Gania. Appreciate him coming on, especially on his drive here to his next destination, where he's going to be some other unnamed cartoon character at some point here. But we're going to bring on Dr. Liao. We're going to go into the Honolulu Blue tent here. Figured that was a good way to kick off the season. We're probably talking about injuries earlier than we wanted, but they're always pertinent. And we're going to preview the season with him here after the break. So stick with us. You're listening to Sports Intel on Jethro FM.
Sports Intel with Ryan Walsh.